morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. My name is Rena Nicole, also known as the Green Rena, and today I have Shel Horowitz talking about making green sexy, framing the message from reaching green to non-green audiences. So starting as a teenager more than 40 years ago, Shel's combined innovative marketing thinking with green activism. Shel's 8th book, Guerrilla Marketing Goes Green, is published in 3 languages and has been a consistent Amazon and environmental category bestseller. His monthly column, Green and Profitable, runs on several continents. His worldwide consulting client list includes businesses, nonprofits, and community organizations. He's frequently quoted in major media, including repeat appearances in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Entrepreneur magazine. Shel has spoken to audiences as diverse as the Customer Service Conference in Istanbul, a public relations conference in Davos, Switzerland, and major green events including Green America's Green Festival, Solar Fest, Gulf Coast Green, and Pioneers by the Bay. We're delighted to have him here today, and so without further ado, let me please welcome to you Shel Horowitz.
Thank you so much, Rena. And why is this not moving? There we go.
Okay. All right. Let me close myself off here so people can focus just on you.
So we're going to talk about a couple of different kinds of sexy in this presentation today. One is kind of the traditional version of sexy, such as the sports car you see in front of you. This happens to be an electric vehicle. It's a Tesla. Now, when you are trying to make green sexy to non-greens, a few things you need to keep in mind is that you have to make it as good or better than what they can get elsewhere. That could be such factors as luxury and speed with a Tesla, but also, for example, price. One of the things I like to do with my marketing clients is to have those benefit points be tied to the green features so that people begin to get educated and say, oh, you mean I can have all those good things and still be green? It doesn't have to be a sackcloth and ashes kind of thing. Tesla's really good at this. I would give it a 10. So the key principle, if you take away one thing from this presentation, I want it to be this, that when you combine the message of self-interest and global purpose, everybody wants to listen. And as you position green as more superior to, more economical than, more comfortable, whatever, you're going to hit both those points. This is a company called Markel. They went recycled a very long time ago. They went recycled in 1950. You can see that up at the top, saving trees since 1950. This is, I think, a kind of sexy package for both the green market and the regular ordinary people. It's got these nice fall colors and lots of big, bold logos, and yet it's comfortable to the eye. But you have to look at where they used to be. This is Markel in 1965. Not very sexy. In fact, really, really dull, boring packaging, and not a word front or back about recycles. Now, I can kind of understand that because back then this was still, even though it was halfway through the decade, it was really before the 60s started culturally in a lot of ways. And if you said to people, oh, I'm making new toilet paper out of your old junk mail, they're going to say, ugh, gross! So I can understand why they'd want to highlight it, but I am a little surprised that they didn't mention it at all. Not then and not until much, much later. So what's different now? Okay, first of all, they're not at all shy about what they're doing in terms of the environmental benefit. They finally realize they are sitting on a huge asset as a pioneer with recycled paper. It's bold, it's bright, it's visible, it's easy to read. It's got this higher calling of saving trees, saving 1 million trees, in fact. And they've got that cool little benefit-focused environmental facts up in the bottom corner. Here you can see it up close. The interesting thing I'd say about these environmental facts is that it actually gives people a reason to compare with their existing brand. Because let's look at that again. You know, you see chlorine bleach for whitening, 0. So that makes you ask, well, is my other toilet paper company bleaching with chlorine? What does that mean? And if you do a little research and you discover that chlorine bleach is really not a good thing for the environment or particularly for skin, you start to wonder. So this is very clever. They stole this obviously from the food industry and the nutrition facts that are required on all packages sold in the United States. But they made it their own. They really put a nice little marketing spin on it. So some lessons to take away from Markel. First of all, obviously, if you have a green story to tell it. There is a market for it, and that market is growing actually 29% a year. Appeal to the greens with a higher cause. That's to save 1 million trees. But also they appeal to the non-greens in that they compete very strongly on price and quality. It's a very decent product. I use it in my own bathroom. And it's much less expensive than many of the other recycled brands. So here are things that happened to Markel. Back when their packaging looked like that upper left example where they were beginning to tell the green story, but in a not real clear way, they were, I think, still a little ashamed and worried. They went bankrupt. Then they introduced something resembling the current packaging in April 2009 with the Small Steps brand and the fall foliage packaging. They actually dubbed themselves the official sponsor of fall foliage. And 8 months later, they were the top-selling recycled brand. Remember, this company was bankrupt a couple of years earlier. So this was a pretty remarkable turnaround just by telling the green story. Now here is our own Green Rena, host of this webinar. This is her avatar based on a real photo. This is something I think will be sexy in both the traditional meaning and the green meaning. So what the message that I'm getting from this is that green can be hot in the positive sense.
You're sweet, Shel. Thanks.
It's also and Rena's own background is not white. She's Filipino, so this avatar is Asian. And the magazine has a very strong multicultural focus, so this reinforces that branding. Now, anybody in America probably knows this brand. But if you're listening from somewhere else, this is a very famous socially and environmentally conscious ice cream company. Now, interestingly enough, there are 2 players of any consequence in the United States super premium ice cream market. One is Ben & Jerry's, and the other is a company called Häagen-Dazs. Häagen-Dazs is a big corporate cold giant. You might think of it as the Exxon of super premium ice cream. And Ben & Jerry's is this funky little hippie startup that 2 guys put together in a garage in Burlington, Vermont, which is outside the mainstream of American business. They had no business training. They, in fact, had no training in ice cream. They actually started the company after buying a mail-order correspondence course on how to make ice cream. And yet, these 2 companies together typically push back and forth between 40 and 45% of the market share each, leaving only a very tiny sliver for the hundreds of other companies in that space. How does Ben & Jerry's compete with this well-funded corporate giant Häagen-Dazs? Well, I think that a lot of the reason they do compete so well is because everywhere you look with this company, they have integrated social and environmental concerns. You know, there's a slide that I use in my longer show that actually talks about their scoop shops, which they have partnerships with agencies that work with developmentally disabled people to hire those people and give them jobs scooping ice cream. You find that their commitment to fair trade is very visible. You find them at green festivals and solar fairs handing out samples and sponsoring the events, putting their money where their mouths are. And you'll notice this is a somewhat different retelling of what we call the triple bottom line. And the first, the first is about the product and not so much the environment, but even there you see at the bottom there, promoting business practices that respect the earth and the environment, as well as all the cool stuff about the natural flavors and the tasty ice cream that they've got. Essential to the mission of Ben & Jerry's is the belief that all 3 parts must thrive equally in a manner that commands deep respect for individuals in and outside the company and supports the communities of which they are a part, and they walk their talk. And the one that I think is the most important there is over on the social side, to operate the company in a way that actively recognizes the central role that business plays in society by initiating innovative ways to improve the quality of life locally, nationally, and internationally. Now, on their website, for example, you can find profiles of some of their fair trade suppliers, like a cocoa grower in the Côte d'Ivoire. Now, I think that Ben & Jerry's needed both the green and ethical market, which supported them based on their values, but also the market of super premium ice cream lovers who like a really good product and were enjoying the Ben & Jerry's playful style of marketing and packaging. So I think you need both, and I think they've got both. And that is why they're one of the top 2 brands in the country in that niche. Now we flip over to my own neighborhood, so to speak. This is a conference center about 15 miles from me, and it is a client of mine. This is the Montague Retreat Center in Montague, Massachusetts. Now they came to me for some marketing help, and what I discovered is that they've got an incredible history in the movement. Liberation News Service moved to this farm in, I think, 1968 after leaving New York City. The book No Nukes was written on this farm. The American safe energy movement really was birthed here. The Muse concerts, those big benefit concerts in the late 1970s in New York City, were organized here. This was an old hippie commune, and amazing things happened there. So in marketing this venue to people who might want to have anything from a wedding to a yoga class, we are really pulling from that history. We are saying, don't you want to be part of a place that meant so much to where we are as a country, how we think today? This is historic. We're also touting the solar panels on the roof and the geothermal heating and cooling system. So it is actually a green building. This is the renovated barn. And we're building the whole marketing around this. It's very exciting. We're very new in this project. Okay, you all, I'm sure, recognize this building on Fifth Avenue in New York City. Now, the Empire State Building was built in the early 30s. In the early 30s, energy was really cheap. I believe that gas prices were somewhere in the vicinity of 19 cents a gallon when this building was built. So, needless to say, they didn't build for energy efficiency. They built for status and power and to be the then tallest building in the world. Distinction it held for some 40 years. Well, about 5 years ago, the Empire State Building's owners got together with a consortium of companies to help them go green. One of the companies was Amory Lovins's Rocky Mountain Institute, one was Johnson Controls, there were several others. And they decided to see what they could do to make this a green building. And I have to tell you, it was not a cheap project, okay? This is a big building. It's over 100 stories tall. They spent $13 million to do it. But they are making back more than $4 million every year on energy savings. Now, I don't know about you, but I am not getting a 33% ROI or a 3-year payback on any of my investments. So, and they did some amazing things. They actually took a whole floor of the building and made it into a window factory to renovate the windows. Every single window in this massive building has been upgraded. All sorts of cool stuff like that. And again, saving $4 million a year. So the first 3 years you've paid back the whole investment. The next 3 years you're clearing $12 million in additional cost savings, and then maybe by then you need to put some aside for maintenance. So maybe you're only putting aside $8 or $10 million in savings after that. I still think that's a pretty good deal. So when you're talking to greens, there are of course dozens of different topic areas that you can build talking points around. I've picked 4 here to talk about. So in the environment, of course, if you're using any kind of clean renewable energy system, you want to talk about that. Zero waste is going to be one of the 2 big environmental issues we're going to hear about much more in the coming years than we have so far. There's far more to talk about than just catastrophic climate change. I think you'll be hearing people talk about waste, and you'll be hearing people talk about water. So that's, and then the little picture down there is actually a picture I took when I toured the Markel plant. That is some of the paper products they're processing into new recycled paper products, as they have been doing since 1950. On the ethics and caring side, you've got the top left and bottom right ones there dealing with health concerns. And again, remember what I talked about, making that point that the green features are why you're able to do this. So It's not just that you're reducing asthma, but you're reducing asthma by using the clean energy. The top right there is inspired by a company called Dean's Beans, a coffee grower here in Western Massachusetts, that is 100% fair trade and organic and has been since the day that they bought their first coffee bean, and funnels quite a bit of money into community development projects that are run by the people who live in those communities. It's not the outside big paternalistic social service agency coming in. It's the people who live and work there who are figuring out how to use this money to build wells or to provide solar lighting or whatever they're doing. And then down on the bottom left, this is a bank in my area that had a brilliant campaign. They're going to give $50,000 a year to local charities, and they're going to let their account holders determine which charities get the money by voting. So what happens? You go to a school and your parents get a note in their mailbox saying, hey, please open an account at Florence Savings Bank so that you can vote for us. You're participating in a community group, and all the members in the newsletter say, hey, did you realize that you could send money to us just by being a Florence Savings depositor? So a lot of people opened up accounts. Good marketing. On justice, redlining, if you don't know, was a practice that is now illegal. Through at least the 70s and 80s, banks would say, okay, we're simply not going to lend in these areas. They're too risky. So what happened is that those were the areas, of course, with high concentrations of poverty, and then they had no way out of poverty because they couldn't build up the infrastructure. Fortunately, that is illegal now, but some banks and community funding credit unions and places like that, one that comes to mind is Shore Bank in Chicago, actively work against this by specifically lending in areas that other banks don't want to lend. Okay, 10% tithe is something you find very common, or 1% tithe. And then from the Occupy Wall Street movement, of course, we are the 99%. Now that's a really interesting meme because really they're a tiny little marginal splinter of the 99%. In numbers, the people who are willing to camp out in a park and essentially live the lifestyle of the poor and homeless to make a political point is not a large number. But here was an anchor that they threw out the rest of us. We're really just like you. We care about the same things. We're upset about the big banks. And just because we're being more out and visible than you are doesn't mean that you can't support us and can't feel included in our movement. Helping the disadvantaged. Okay, Greyston Bakery on the left there, they supply the brownies that Ben & Jerry's uses in their ice cream. And their slogan is actually, we don't hire people to bake brownies. We bake brownies to hire people. And their focus is on providing jobs and job training and skills to people who are basically unemployable in the traditional work environment. They're located in Yonkers, New York, just outside New York City, a very poor area. The people they hire have prison records, or they've been in mental hospitals, or they've been homeless.